everybody. Welcome to the Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority meeting, Wednesday, November 7th, 2018. Susan, would you like to take roll?
Absolutely. Bob Gutzel.
Here.
Tyler Kinley.
Here.
Marie Klopp.
Present.
Howard Lazarus.
Here.
Jessica Letow.
Yes.
Joan Lowenstein.
Here.
Molly McFarland.
Here.
Darren McKinnon.
Present.
John Moat.
Here.
Rishi Narayan.
Here.
Keith Orr.
Here.
Phil Weiss.
Here.
We have a quorum.
So I'd like to start with the approval of the board meeting agenda. Do I have an emotion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, motion, or the agenda is approved. Next up is audience participation. Seeing no one, we'll move to 4, reports from the city boards and commissions, but I also don't see Ray.
Well, how about I go first and then I come back to it?
Sounds great. So,
So, for the member communications.
are there any DDA member communications?
So as usual, most of you know, I do monthly downtown hall coffee hours, 1 coffee hour and 1 walking tour. This month, the coffee hour is this evening, 7 to 8:30 p.m. at Westgate Library, the Sweetwater's at Westgate Library, and then our walking tour is this coming Saturday, 10 to 11:30 a.m. We start on the west side of Blake Transit Center, so the side that faces the 4th and William garage, and then we walk essentially the people-friendly streets projects and talk about the work in the coming years.
Thank you. Anybody else? Susan, the Executive Director of Communications?
Sure. So one small item, at our work session with council last month, it was suggested that DDA members would meet with Energy Commission members, talk about sustainability goals. I've been working with staff over at the city on this, and tentatively we've been looking to have a meeting next month, but we both agreed we're not ready yet. So we're going to schedule this sometime into early 2019. We'll have a better shot at what the agenda needs to look like so we can make sure we maximize your time. So if any of you had it tentatively on your calendar for next month, take it off. And then the other thing to mention is, in light of the Partnerships Committee resolution about the Y lot, just a little information. At the Partnerships Committee meeting, we talked about strategies that were put forward in a staff report about the Y lot and how it could be utilized to help the city and the community realize its goal of affordable and workforce housing. And we talked about the strategies, which included one option, which would be all affordable, one that would work with private partners on that site to create workforce and market rate housing in a commercial space. Another option that would potentially be a partnership with the with the property, and then ATA, the library, and the DDA to create sort of a multi-parcel strategy. And because discussions around the strategies are still fairly new, we didn't really get into specifically which direction might make most sense, but in any of them, DDA would play a part. So I thought to give to you, in hopes this was useful, the city administrator and I and representatives of some of their adjoining townships, the county. We meet monthly to talk about affordable housing and where we're going. And at the last meeting, which was about 4 weeks ago, we got a summary, a summation of kind of where we are with affordable housing. And I thought to make a copy of that for today's discussion. And I'm happy to share it with anybody who may be interested. In 2015, the county, the city, the DDA, many municipalities, we co-commissioned a housing needs assessment. And what it saw was a pretty stark divide, not a surprise, but a shock nonetheless, that on the west side of 23, Ann Arbor and Pittsfield Township, we shared this challenge of strong and rising demand for housing and not enough housing units for people to go into, which means we have a very dramatic housing affordability challenge. Whereas on the other side of 23, Ipsy and Ipsy Township, they have an alternate problem where the demand for home ownership is low. There's a problem with falling values, so therefore there's less city services than would like to be seen. And so there were strategies devised for both sides of 23. On page 3, I laid out among the goals were to add units on the west side of 23 and to work to get home ownership or home residence with people on the east side of 23, including households with a bachelor's degree because that is one of the keys to getting sort of a stabilized housing market. Since that time, since 2015, what we've learned is poverty rates are actually getting worse. Now, unsurprisingly, we hear nationally that there's a stark divide between the upper end and the lower end, and we're seeing it in our county. We are seeing, as you turn the page, an increase in the rental costs because demand is outstripping supply. Our own look at this through the downtown report, I think our average rent downtown is like $1,900 a month. This is looking at 2 bedrooms in the city, and it's at $1,400 as an average rent. Go to the next page. What is of concern to us in particular, I'm hearing from restaurant owners they can't find employees. And if you look at this, the sector that has one of the fastest growing number of jobs are people in restaurants, and unfortunately their wages keep them well below what could be affordable. And with the fact that Ypsilanti, if you turn the page, you see Ypsilanti is now becoming unaffordable for people who rent. It is not a surprise that our hospitality businesses, which also includes our hotels and so forth, can't find the employees they need to keep their businesses growing. And in many instances, a lot of restaurants, for instance, reflect that by not being open during lunch hours. But even with that, I've had conversations with some restaurant owners who themselves are doing they're the bus boys, they're doing the dishes, they're doing everything because they can't find the employees to help them with these things. And so as you look at affordability and how it's a countywide concern, it gets us to kind of what has been happening since 2015, so on page 8. Thank you, Jessica, for the ADU. You'll see that's on this list. You can see that there are strategies that are being attempted to try to help get at this problem of affordability. There have been some successes. And you turn the next page, you can see, every part of this county is really trying to find their way in on what to do about it, which gets to page 10, which is since 2015, the goal was 140 units in the city of Ann Arbor. We have mastered 50. We got 50. Most of that is due to the Housing Commission renovating its properties and being able to find new units there. We have not been very successful. And that is, I think, feeding a concern that you're going to hear from the Partnerships Committee to do something, that this is really an urgency. And adding to the perfect storm, if you turn to the last page, the county pointed out that many affordable properties are themselves now likely to go to market rate in the very near term. So as bad as it is, as much demand has been building, as much as it costs too much to construct, and so we're not seeing housing being built at that level, as much as we're seeing an increase in the number of service workers, now you add to it that the amount of housing in this community that has been affordable to people earning less than market wages are going to be disappearing. So I thought to share this because the Partnerships Committee had a bit of a discussion, and I think it should continue at the board table. There is a definite sense of urgency. We have, of course, a lot of needs in our community, but one of the challenges is how to keep the character of Ann Arbor, if in fact it's only for people who have a house or who earn above a certain amount. So I don't know that we all know the right strategies, but I thought to share the data that at least is available to sort of convey why Partnerships Committee wanted to do something bold. So with that, I want to thank the Partnerships Committee. You teed up a really important question, and I know there's an interest on the part of many of you to do something this year toward the goal of affordable housing. So I thought to share the data. Thank you.
Thank you. So it doesn't look like Mr. Detter will be here today, so we'll just continue.
Wait.
Oh.
I don't know. I just don't move as quickly as you can.
We're saying we need this.
Don't sit down, Ray. You're up.
Am I up? As long as I'm not down.
Or down with that, that's okay.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
16 members of the Downtown Citizen Advisory Council and also nearby downtown neighbors were joined last night at City Council chambers by 12 students from Skyline High School to discuss possible future development in the downtown and the central area. We were also joined by CAC member John Splitt, who resides near West William and First, who is now a member of the Citizens Advisory Council. And of course, he's within his view is the tree line downtown. A promoter, Luke Bonner, was there to explain the conceptual design for Standard at Ann Arbor, 425 South Main, a 250,000 square foot mixed-use building being proposed for that site. The design team is seeking feedback for the massing scheme as well as architectural style and details. It's a very important building for the future of downtown Ann Arbor. They've already met once with the city's design review board and will probably meet with them 2 more times before moving ahead with their project. We used to only meet once with the design review. Now we meet 3 times, which I think is a step forward in terms of development. Our group was eager to discuss connectivity issues in relationship to the 4th and William parking structure across the street from that new development, the possible inclusion of parking, as well as ranges of affordable housing on the nearby YMCA side, as well as a potential core project on the library lot. And of course, that one is way up in the air at this particular point with regard to what the future will be. We recognize the necessity of examining the possible positive and negative interconnectivity of these important downtown sites. In that regard, our discussion also included consideration of a new 4-story, 14-unit upscale housing development, the Garnett, after Garnett Johnson, for those who know who may know her. Also the recent groundbreaking for condos and rentals at the corner of Broadway and Maiden Lane. That's 600 units of housing up there. And they're doing a good job moving ahead on that very quickly. Also, of course, development of the DTE Riverside and even the future location of Ann Arbor's railroad terminal. It's still up in the air and will be, it appears, for quite some time. These may be farther apart from the other ones that I earlier mentioned, but they deserve to be considered in our future plans. Sorry for being late.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Ray. Next up is approval of the minutes of the October minutes, which you all have in the packet. Can I have an motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, the meeting minutes are approved. Next, we have subcommittee reports, and we'll start with Bob from the Finance Committee.
Okay, thank you. We had an excellent meeting, and the first part was devoted to the review of our annual audit. Our auditors led us through the document, and I'm really pleased to say that it was a clean audit with no recommendations for changes. And if you're part of an organization, this is what you hope for. And it's a real credit to DDA, but more importantly to our employees and especially Joe. The auditors called out and gave Joe a lot of credit for having timely, accurate financial statements, making it somewhat straightforward and easy to do an audit. And I would say that the committee joins in that appreciation, Joe, as well as the board. So great job, and Joe will be happy to answer any questions about the audit. I think you have a copy of it. And so in front of you, I think on page 18, it's a resolution recommended by the committee to accept the audit. And I would move that resolution.
So do you have a motion to approve?
I'll second it.
The resolution.
You moved it, I seconded it.
All right. Any discussion? Any questions?
Joe, I don't know if you want to.
Tell us on Grid.
We're counting on it.
Come on, Joe, this is your moment. Page 7.
Any other questions?
No, it is crucial that we have timely and accurate financial statements, and that's what we have here. So we're very fortunate.
Good job, Joe. Okay, so all those in favor of accepting the clean audit, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All right,
Okay.
audit is approved.
Great. The committee reviewed the financial statements for the first quarter of fiscal 19, the funds committed report, and the September expense register were reviewed. These are included in the board packet, I think, starting on page 21. Any questions or comments about those? Okay. Any further questions of the Finance Committee? Our next meeting is Thursday, November 29th, 2018 at 1 p.m. That's our regular meeting. We've moved the December meeting to Thursday, December 20th at 12:30. That was originally scheduled for, I think, December 27th, and we thought it was good to get it taken care of before the holidays. So please note that.
The agenda says something about status of the first Ashley Huron William bond. Is that, are we supposed to talk about that?
No, just let you know it's moving forward. We understand that the city will be going to market, I think, early in 2019. And so we look forward to being able to report when that happens.
Okay, next up is Partnerships and Economic Development Committee, Joan and Jessica.
Okay, I'll take it since I think Jessica was out of town.
I was there.
You were there, okay. Sorry about that. First up from our Partnerships Committee, we have a resolution which can be found on page 19. And this is what Susan referenced in her remarks. It's a resolution to commit $745,000 in DDA funds, and that's what the total that we have in our affordable housing fund, to realize the goal of constructing a substantial number of new affordable and workforce housing units from the redevelopment of the 350 South 5th Avenue property. So I'd like to move that.
Support.
I think Susan covered a lot of what we talked about from the housing needs assessment. That not much has been done since all of those things were pointed out. The history is that the Y lot was originally purchased by City Council in order to preserve affordable housing, because there had been 100 units there of very affordable housing that was, it was SROs, not standing room only, but single room occupancy housing that was there, that is the important step up from homelessness. And so that's why the City Council initially purchased the Y lot. And if the council is indeed intent on coming through with the promise that it made at that time, the DDA is willing to commit to helping achieve that. So that's why we're recommending that we commit those funds. We don't have a specific commitment right now for exactly where all those funds would go, but we wanted to go on board with saying that we are willing to commit those funds.
Got a question. So, do we know whether the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board has taken out some sort of stand in all this, and what the sort of state of play is with them, and any other sort of folks at the city or associated?
I'm happy to answer that.
Yeah, go ahead, Jess.
City Council asked Jennifer Hall of the Ann Arbor Housing Commission to review the I lot and what the possibilities for that lot would be, with an emphasis on looking at affordable housing, but exploring what's possible, not just to suit our community's need, but financially what's feasible. So in September, after a few months, Jennifer Hall presented a series of recommendations to the Housing and Human Services Board, or Advisory Board, presenting 4 options with an emphasis on recommending mixed income development where there is, I believe, some market rate housing, but subsidizing deeply affordable housing on that lot. She has some really interesting recommendations, and perhaps we could share that report around with the board in exploring partnerships with multiple public entities. So, for example, what if the library and the AATA were to explore a partnership in that building in addition to housing? So Jennifer Hall's report goes into a lot of different things, but she really gets deep into the finances of what's needed and what's likely, and her report, I think, carries a lot of weight. Is there anything else, Susan, that you would like to say?
I was just going to say, with what little I know, the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board has endorsed option 2B. That's the one that was just mentioned.
Okay, no, that was sort of the key thing. I just want to make sure I understood. Thank you.
I will say too that there is, in kind of the broad language of this, there is nothing that prevents the DDA as a development authority from being the developer of this property.
As was brought up at the City Council DDA work session.
Right.
So we think this is a little push towards our partners to help support this issue, Joan. You think it's presumptuous of us to do that?
Well, I don't think it's presumptuous because we are a development authority and because we already, as is stated in the resolution, have put so much money into this lot already. I think that but for the DDA, the city would not have been able to purchase that Y lot and have it to this day. So I think, you know, we've already gone part of the way. This is simply a resolution stating our intent. As I said, it's not, there isn't any specific thing that is funded by this money, but it's stating our intent to be either a partner or a leader in this kind of development. And then it's up to the owner of the property to make that decision.
I think there's also the sense, just a moment, Rishi, there's also the sense of making sure that the ball keeps rolling. So the site was vacated in 2002, if I remember correctly. The building was demolished in 2005. So for 13 years, we've had nothing going on in that lot besides parking. And in the meantime, our housing needs have become more and more critical. So in the hopes that, you know, this doesn't continue to languish for another 4 or 10 or 13 or 71 years, this is another step in that process. I'm sorry, you were going to ask a question.
I was just going to ask about the mechanics. So is this being budgeted out, like, or we just, is it being put in the budget, or what are the mechanics on it?
The money is in our affordable housing fund, so we don't really have to budget anything. I think it's just a resolution. I think what it would mean is that if someone comes to us, as people have before, saying, you know, can you put a new roof on this public housing building or something like that, then we would have to really rethink and say, well, we've got this resolution, so we don't know that we have the money to.
So we might want to actually line item it so that it's clear, called out.
Well, it's also worth noting that this is the money that's in the affordable housing budget right now. Come, I believe, July 1st, it gets refunded again. So this is money that's there, but it's not forever. So
no, for sure. But I just in prior experience, like 2 years from now, no one will remember what money is where, and so like we built a whole sheet to like remind ourselves, like what did we commit to 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Stuff doesn't get cashed on time, stuff doesn't get built on time, stuff's rolling, and just like when we commit to stuff that isn't going out, and this one doesn't seem like it's not going out in this fiscal year, so rolling stuff just gets forgotten, and I haven't been around that long, so I mean, you know.
I don't know if this is the kind of thing that gets an asterisk in the budget, you know, where you look at it and you say, okay, this is the fund, but it's committed.
See, you had to come up ultimately.
Sorry, Joe.
If you commit it, it'll show up on the audit under the fund balance as committed for the purpose that you've committed it for, and it'll stay there until the board takes action to either take it back or spend it.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks.
So my question, I'm sorry, and then you had a question first.
No, I actually was just going to answer the same thing she did.
Oh, okay.
If you're the chairman, you get to go.
Well, my question would be, so in what way does this impact, let's say, city council into making a decision? That would be, Howard, how do they get this message, and what happens with this information?
City council voted last May to purchase the property back from Mr. Dahlman when his option on the property expired. So at the time, shortly after they approved the purchase, they passed a resolution directing the administrator to work with the Housing Authority to develop a plan for redevelopment. And Jennifer was the lead on that. We brought the plan back, providing several different options. One of the last options was if we don't get a development partner over a period of 4 years, we would put the property up for sale. So the funding here will most likely go towards additional development of the financial model and some preliminary engineering work on the property. So council will have to adopt a contract to do that work, and this funding will be part of that work to get the site ready for redevelopment.
I don't know if that's the intent of this resolution. Is it to spend this money until there's a fully baked project, which is my understanding. But we're willing to contribute $745,000 if this passes. That would be part of a X $1 million total development. Are we looking to potentially spend $745 on preliminary studies that may lead to nothing? I don't think we are.
The funding in here is it's not otherwise restricted. There is some work to entitle and develop the property so that it can be put to beneficial use. I mean, if your intent is to further restrict its use, you'd have to amend this resolution.
So this was all, well, my question is simply the process moving forward, next steps of who's doing what to whom. What can you tell us, Howard, about how you see, obviously you've got the council coming in and all.
DDA monies in the past also been put forward to buy affordable units within development as well. So that's, I think, to get to Mr. McKinnon's point, that could be part of the use of the money as well if it's a mixed income development that comes out of it as well. But the resolution here doesn't restrict the funds in any way, so if you wanted to restrict them, you'd have to take that action to do it as well.
But I guess I'm asking a different question. I'm actually asking the bigger question about the process moving forward for how the city and council, whose court is the ball in? If you,
it's in the city's court to develop a, I guess, a statement of need as to what we'd like to have built on the property, and then put that out for development.
Susan?
I was just to add is at a staff level, we're working together. You know, the DDA had committed $25,000 this summer toward that very purpose, as has the city, as has ATA actually. So with those $75,000, staff are working toward the goal of hiring a consultant. And a large part of that is to actually help us and guide us in a public input process. Because I think council would need this also for the community. What are we trying to get done, and how can we get it done? An example is levels of affordability and how does that fit, but more importantly, having some guidance on the density, what the envelope of the building would look like, so we don't end up where we have a building that people feel is oversized, but we're accomplishing a lot of units. There's going to be a balance on what the envelope will need to be and how much we can accomplish on that one site. So I think at a staff level, we're hoping to do some engagement with the community to get some guidance from our community to help give guidance to what we may see as the project on that site. We're not there yet, but we'd be working together with this consultant to get that input.
So those funds are separate, though, from the $745,000. As Susan said, 3 primary partners have each put some funds in place. But I think it's also important to stress that the Affordable Housing Fund right now is running on fumes. So it's not unreasonable that some other costs may come up that will require a funding source.
I guess I don't read in this a limitation as to what it's going to be used for, but nor do I read in it anything that says that the funds are being released. In other words, the way I read it is a more general principle that we are committing this $145,000 of our affordable housing fund, which can be used in many different ways. We're basically saying we are going to be using it towards this particular goal. And the way that gets used isn't spelled out in any way whatsoever. So it could well be that that City Council says, this is what we want, these are the types of things that need, and then we get to revisit it at that point. So I don't think there's a concern here that says, oh, we've just handed it out and it can be used any which way on that site, because we obviously want to see something happen. I mean, one of the things that, as I recall, Darren, when you first brought this up at the joint meeting, was how so often we struggle with trying to accomplish a certain goal, and we put out an RFP and we don't necessarily get our goals. And that one of the things that inspired those comments was the idea that we are a development authority, and perhaps there is a way that the city and the DDA can look at achieving these goals in a way, in a different manner than just simply, putting it out on an RFP. So I'm not as concerned, I think, as I understand your concern that, we've opened the bank account. I don't think we've done that. We've just laid out what the goals are for it, and how that's specifically going to be used is yet to be determined.
It's a commitment of the funds for a purpose. I guess there'd have to be a subsequent action on the board to approve the expenditure of the funds, but my point is that they're not restricted for any particular use in this resolution. I think, which gets to Darren's point, that the board could further reduce the range of things that the funds could be used for in developing the project. It could clearly state that they only want to use for construction or purchase of units. Or they could state that it's allowable to pay for soft costs. It would depend on what the desire of the board is. But this is, as you point out, it's just a commitment of funds at this point. But I think what I was getting at is there's not a lot of other sourcing for funds other than the $75,000 we have right now to develop a financial model and analysis. But as we go forward, depending on how the property gets developed, there could be competing uses.
I was just going to say, in light of what Keith said, if it is very, let's call it loose, and the goal is to spur action, there's not really anything that spurs action. So how is this any different than we all discussed at the work session that we want to do this? And this doesn't set a deadline or a goal timeline or anything. So I'm not saying that we should amend anything. Obviously I'm in support of it, but it's not really designed to push anyone to do anything, really, when it's all said and done.
I think coming out of that joint session, though, there still seemed to be some ambiguity about what the DDA's commitment to affordable housing was. I mean, we all voiced that support a lot, but it wasn't necessarily a strong commitment, or there was some questioning of it. And so I would think that this statement wasn't necessarily to spur direct action, but more to say 100% on paper, we're committed. What are you going to do to move it forward? It doesn't have to be a timeline, but it's almost like balls a little bit out of our court. We're saying 100% we're there, we're coming to the table. You got to meet us.
So I have a question. So what are the odds that the money gets used for a bunch of work, like you said, Darren, and then nothing happens? Is that a concern? Does anybody feel like we should make it more restrictive? No?
Here's what I think. I don't think that we necessarily need to restrict it, because then that can be used against us. Well, you restricted it, so you're not really committed. So I think for it to be spent, we have to be asked. And at the point where we're asked, that at that point we can decide, do we want this? So I think all of us would probably agree if the ask is, will you pay 100% of our administrative costs while we come up with an RFP that's never going to happen? We would say no. And, otherwise we'll look at whatever the reasonable ask is.
I think we're all committed to trying to find some way that this gets turned into a positive action to finally do something about what isn't happening with this. And it's not a very specific thing in terms of how it's used, and I'm fine with that at this point. It's specific in where it's to be used. And I think that is at least a starting point. It might not, as she says, it may not be the fully fleshed out, here's how this $745,000 is going to help us accomplish that goal. But it is saying that this is a goal we want to accomplish and we're willing to commit to that.
I'm good with putting it out there, and the reality, as long as we take in the reality, which is like, with that, it's like a whole lot of other work to like get the ask, right? It's like, we want to get asked to the dance, like, I guess we got to really like put ourselves out there. So. I have no experience with that.
Could I change seats, please?
If I could add, when Susan and I met with the Housing Equity Leadership Group,
Yeah.
whatever it's called.
Whatever we call it.
One of the concerns and one of the ideas of if we keep doing the same thing, we'll get different results, is that it's a struggle to get what you want out of a privately funded mixed income, mixed use development in terms of the number of affordable units that we'd like to see. So the reason I talked about this being more broad in its potential application is it may be that we don't follow the same model we've used in the past. And there's also in the coming years the concern about the actual purchase cost of the property, and there will be a note coming due on that as well. So the commitment in its general form is probably best at this point, and over the coming months we will come back with a plan as to what we think is the right way to provide for the values that council's put forward for the use of that property.
I'd like to propose a very tiny amendment, but it bugged me when I read it. Known as the YMCA lot. The building that was there was not a YMCA, it was the Ann Arbor Y. And in my purview, I've always heard it referred to as the Y lot, not the YMCA lot. So I would like to propose an amendment that YMCA gets changed to simply Y.
I think we can accept that as a clerical amendment.
Okay.
Not a friendly.
Not a friendly, clerical. I'm okay with that.
Whoa, I need to check my rules. I've never heard of clerical amendments.
I thought you were going to call the question.
So do we need a motion to make a clerical amendment? We don't. All right. So duly noted.
Excellent.
Is there any further discussion? Shall we vote? All right. Do you feel like you need to repeat the resolution, or are we ready?
It's sitting in front of us, so.
Okay. So all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All right, the resolution passes. Good discussion.
I think I still have the floor. I just want to be really formal in how I say things. So the other thing that we talked about will be of interest to those who like to see history rearing its head. Here we talked about a grant that we gave along with, I think only maybe two of us were on the board, 618 South Main, where the DDA provided a grant as a brownfield match, something that we used to do in the old days. And the DDA grant funded the project elements, included streetscape improvements along South Main from Mosley all the way to Packard. And in one segment at 600 South Main, and the value of that was $75,000 in our grant. That's been deferred because there was a development that was supposed to happen and did not. So there's a new developer for 600 South Main that has now requested those DDA funds to complete the improvements. And our committee consensus was, yes, we could reassign that $75,000 grant to this new developer to complete that segment of streetscape, because otherwise we would just have to pay for it anyway.
Is the Happy's Pizza frontage on Main Street?
Yes.
I think that's it. So that was our consensus, is that basically to keep going ahead with what we had planned to happen anyway.
I think there are 4 of us here.
That might be 4 of us, yeah, who remember that, the days of Brownfield grant. So that was it. And our next partnerships meeting is, that's with our DDA partners, and that's November 14th at 9 a.m. Do you have anything else to add, Jessica?
That covers the discussion. We talked a lot, this plus a little bit more about the affordable housing issue, both the problems in Ann Arbor, the problems specific to downtown, and how the DDA could be a partner in helping to address and solve some of those problems. It was a really good discussion.
Okay, next up is the Operations Committee. Keith, Bill?
Start with me. The Parking and Transportation Report. Highlights are in your packet, pages 35 to 37. If there's any discussion around those, please feel free to speak. No? Hearing none?
Thanks for that opportunity.
Is that too quick?
Exactly the right amount of time.
Moving on, there were some equipment changes made at 415 West Washington Pay Stations. We added Easy Pay equipment at 4th and William, and early planning for the 4th and William Alley elevator upgrade, which will take place later in the fiscal year. DDA and Republic parking staff completed their annual maintenance walkthroughs at the lots and structures and noted cosmetic and repair items that will be addressed. The parking fiscal 19 first quarter parking comparison report is in the packet, which compared against first quarter of last fiscal year. Parking revenues were essentially flat. Those revenues include losing $250,000 from the 2 lots that we no longer have. So overall, I think basically the fact that we're flat is a good thing. It also appears that the trend is continuing where the average ticket amount is increasing as people stay longer. So there's less turnover in those spots. The Ann Ashley expansion update. City staff made additional comments on the site plan. So we're working to address those questions and hope to have the site plans resubmitted this week. And then we're hoping that the project can be considered by the Planning Commission in January. So that's the update on Ann Ashley. We also had some robust discussion about our Republic office at the Maynard lot. I'm not going to go through a lot of the detail here, but they need more room to service the public. They would like to have a second bathroom. The staff with Republic need more room and give their human resources person a secured office, improve the training and meeting space, so forth and so on. Right now we have an estimate on the project of $450,000. I think we're still tweaking that. We're still considering different options. Some questions were asked about, do we need to be in that place or should we move it, maybe separate the Republic offices, different parts of the city. I don't think there's been any firm decisions made yet. I think we're still in the discussion phase. Jada, am I missing anything here? I think that was pretty much the tenor of the discussion, and I think we're going to have more discussion in the future, and we'll report back as we make some concrete decisions about that. Any questions or discussion? Now I think we go to the transportation updates. Keith?
Yeah, so let's see. First thing we talked about, or at least the people talked about, was the Go Pass and Get Downtown. The total number of Go Passes distributed at this time of year is up against last year at the same time. But the number of participating employers is down. GoPass ridership is also down. So Get Downtown, Chris is here, is collecting data to try and figure out why ridership is down. And there's a Get Downtown survey summary survey, and the summary report's going to be released soon. We're going to have the report author at our November operations meeting, so we'll be able to get more answers about what's going on there. Bikes, of course, a couple of things about bikes. One is specific to DDA at 4th and Washington, where we've gotten a lot of requests for more bike parking there. So we're creating sort of a bike house. It's not going to be the glamour glassed-in bike house of, as we have at Ann Ashley. But we are going to create more space by taking out the current bike hoops, reconfiguring it, and I believe I might need Jada's help on this because I wasn't there. These are going to be reserved bike hoops, like there's going to be some sort of an entrance area? No. Just okay, so they just going to create more bike parking in that area. Also, as we announced last month, or other people have announced at least, the Arbor Bike does have a new operator, Shift Transit. They're the same people working the bike share program in Detroit. They're going to present to the city's Transportation Commission on November 14th, which is a week from today. I was wondering if we know the time that's happening?
7 o'clock.
7 o'clock? Good for us to hear something about that as well. And then one announcement, which is pretty excellent. The ride is increasing its Sunday Route 4 services from once an hour to every 30 minutes because of the high demand on that route. And of course, that's not a surprise. That route has always high demand 7 days a week. So especially since they increased the hours in that last go-around a few years ago, it makes it more possible for Sunday workers to use it or go to more crowded buses. So going to every 30 minutes on it. That's all I have. Our next Ops Committee meeting is Wednesday, November 28th at 11 a.m. And a note, as was done with another committee, the December meetings, we're going to move up, not quite 1 week, 6 days, I guess, to a Thursday, December 20th at 11 a.m. So, yes?
I have a question, and I don't know if this question is for you or for Chris, but with respect to the declining GoPass participation, is that tracking with overall ridership, or are you saying that GoPass is decreasing as a percentage of travelers in the system?
Yeah, that's a me question. Overall ridership in the same time period for the ride was essentially flat. There was about a 0.4% growth. What we were seeing is approximately a 3 to 4% drop in GoPass ridership over last year. In terms of an overall percentage of what that means for GoPass ridership for the system, that's a pretty small blip. It just shows up as bigger for us. To that extent, though, we are kind of doing a longer dive to take a look at where we're seeing changes with the number of participating companies and what they are doing for their GoPass distribution. I can say with some confidence from the anecdotal information we were getting during this renewal period that there is definitely more interest in paying for parking with the economy going the way it is than there is for picking up the GoPass for individuals. But some of that will start to come through at the Ops Committee meeting next month this month, when we talk about the results from the survey. So I'm not concerned about awareness of the program. I think it's one of these, we're getting buffeted by some economic forces, but we're also going to be doing some analysis to make sure it's not something we're doing in the process.
Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Capital Improvements Committee. John?
Thanks, Marie. So updates on projects, starting with Fifth and Detroit. For those of you who have been down that way recently, there's a lot of work still to be done. As you can tell looking out the window, it's getting cold and it's getting rainy. So it's always a race. The work that's slated in this next week or so includes some asphalt and concrete work. But, already, there are thoughts that things may need to get buttoned up this year. Usually paving plants start to close and all those things. So we'll see in this next couple of weeks how things progress a little bit here. But worst case scenario would be to look to sort of stabilize things over the winter and finish things off in the spring. That's kind of worst case. But obviously lots of folks will get involved in those discussions of what will be in place if that were to come to pass. Huron Street, there was maybe I'd say a pivotal meeting with MDOT and DDA staff and city staff that I think I'd probably look to Howard and or Amber to maybe give us a little bit of an update on that particular meeting. Either of you care to?
So MDOT has raised some additional interests, some of which we agree to comply with, some of which we think are not necessary. I've passed those concerns up the MDOT chain, particularly as it relates to their support of local communities. And there's nothing on there that I think is fatal. They want some more modeling data. They have some concerns about city commitment to the project, and we'll address all of those things. I don't think there's nothing fatal in their request. But whenever you go to a large bureaucracy and ask for something different, you expect some discomfort in return, and we're just helping them get past their discomfort.
So, in general, obviously the biggest single issue is the off-peak parking and so forth, but I think a significant thing to keep in mind is that it doesn't alter the basic design of the project, in terms of curb lines and pedestrian crossings and those sorts of things. So the design team is progressing with the construction documents. I understand they're about 50% through and expect to be complete late November, early December, which seems awfully soon if they're only 50% now. But with the idea of being ready to have it put out to bid, over the winter. So we're still in that mode of moving forward. We've got a project; it'll move forward. We'll have to see if some of the elements that we'd like to get the support with NDOT and what magic city staff can have with that piece of it. William Street, and I'm sort of separating it out a little bit from First and National because it's on a bit of a different track at this point. We talked about getting it kind of moving a little bit faster. So that one is moving along with engineering details and looking to reach out to stakeholders. There's some issues here and there to talk with folks about, but that's moving along. The other thing that's interesting is that staff is starting to think about that notion of how to educate the public about protected bike lanes and what that means, and how does that all start working as part of the communications program for it. First and Ashley, again, similar sort of mode in that the design team's working on design details and are looking to reach out to sort of select folks where there might be issues along the path of both projects, so to kind of keep everyone happy, I guess is maybe the best way to put it. That will happen over the next several months. And so we're a ways off for that one being ready to get to the level of construction documents. It's still in design, essentially. So that's, by and large, where projects are. Does anyone have any questions about the status of the project?
John, I just have not really a question, a comment, which I've already talked to Susan about. On William Street, there's William and Ashley, there's now a four-way stop. I don't know if anybody knew that.
Yes.
Which is good.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Obviously, slows cars.
No, now that you say that, I'm like, oh, this is weird. Everybody's stopping. That's,
I know.
Except you.
I just thought it was like people were just doing what they weren't supposed to be doing. That's awesome. That's cool.
Are you done?
No, I'm still amazed by it now that you say it.
So
It all makes
cars
sense.
traveling up the hill from west to east on William in the winter, when that street is frozen,
Go another way.
it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
Cars will be sliding back down that hill, probably right into John Split's front yard. Just saying.
Or they'll just hit the
I just
train.
hope that the city knows about this and will put extra salt, sand, whatever on that hill, because it will be tough going. That's all I have to say.
I've seen that too.
I've been there.
Yeah, I mean, we'd actually, you may remember at CIC meetings, we brought up that question about, as we've looked at the redevelopment of those projects, because you may remember the tool design brought up the idea of maybe some signalized intersections would get changed to four-way stops. And we've got other streets too that have hills, and
Yeah.
It is Michigan.
All right.
I agree though, but
It
that
is
is a
nice.
very dangerous corner because we have little kids that cross that
Yep.
street and there's been accidents
The stop signs
twice
are
now
good.
that's happened right in front of the kids.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're thrilled that it is a
Yeah.
four-way stop now, but you're right.
Yeah,
in the winter it's-
it's a tricky issue. It's no doubt about it. I think it's one of those things though that, I think my personal opinion is you have to sort of err in the direction of caution, and, with there being a lot of kids in that area. And maybe it can be viewed as, let's see what happens this winter.
We are starting to apply brine as opposed to salt, which is much better at reducing ice and helping us get down to pavement. So I think that'll address some of the concern. But anytime there's snow and ice on the road, all drivers are
Right.
conditioned to display more caution.
Yeah. Well, usually what happens when it's frozen, you try to get a head start and just blow right through the intersection, which isn't safe either, but that's the reality.
Well, in this education program we're talking about, maybe we should have downtown driver's ed programs.
Maybe.
Here at the DDA to teach people how to drive downtown.
Yeah.
So Fifth and Detroit, you mentioned the schedule on Thanksgiving's 2 weeks from tomorrow.
Yeah.
Typically, you don't get asphalt after Thanksgiving. That project scares me. When I look, somebody that does a lot of construction and knows how long things take, I'm very concerned about it being done, and I think that if we're here in April and we're not done, you're talking about buttoning it up, I think you're gonna have some angry citizens, and I'm wondering what can be done in the next 2 weeks to maybe do something different than we've been doing. What I hear is that we've been very, very accommodating to the businesses and the people who use that area to try to not impact their life as much as possible with such a big project, but I'm thinking it's time to do something a little different in the next 2 weeks to really put the pedal to the metal. How much can we possibly get done before we eat turkey?
Yeah, Darren, I can tell you staff is acutely aware of that challenge. And those are the conversations that are happening.
Well, I was actually going to ask Liz to come up and give us all feedback so that I get a lot of questions myself, and maybe just to hear from the acute awareness for all of us.
Yeah, so if you have, limit access, it totally helps. But I think at this point, we're past that helping because our last vehicular access point was Community High's driveway, and that was poured this week. So vehicles, they're not in our construction area. We're still accommodating peds, but we've also kind of narrowed them down, especially the kids coming in and out of Community High. So normally that would help, but I think we're kind of past the point right now. But I mean, I'm still hopeful. We've got the asphalt is what's most limited by the weather, and we don't have that much to do. So hopefully we'll get it in. Next week isn't great, but we've got 2 weeks, and we'll hopefully be able to get that down. And then concrete, we can keep going longer when it's cold.
Are you going to mill and overlay all the way up to Ann Street?
Yes.
I can tell you, I spent some time wandering around on Sunday there just for my own to think about this issue. And I guess even as it is right now, from a pedestrian safety point of view, I think it's actually pretty good. how folks are being directed and so forth. So considering it's a construction site now, I can imagine that it can be, if need be, it can be left in a safe condition, and so forth. So it's not,
The snow clearing would be
believe
incredibly
me,
difficult
Darren,
with the way it's set up right now.
I know where you're coming from, and I think folks are on it as best we can. Unfortunately, right now it's we've got elements and other fish to fry. So
Not trying to manage the project for our staff, but there was a paver sitting out on Kingsley Street, and I think it'd be okay. Realized that we lost about 4 weeks due to the labor dispute on paving.
Yeah, that's impacting asphalt paving everywhere else.
So we do have a capital improvements committee meeting coming up on Wednesday, November 21st at 11 a.m. And a couple of things just to give folks a heads up for that will be for William, an update on it, including this sort of notion of educating people about protected bike lanes and those sorts of things, and what's happening with the city with service, how the service piece of this works. The First and Ashley project, looking at the streetscape elements, have been developed in the time we've been away, and then also following up on the conversation we started last time about potential collaborative projects with the city for the city's CIP, capital improvement. So that's sort of on the agenda for the next meeting. Any other questions?
Thank you,
very
John.
much.
So close to the last agenda on the item is the item on the agenda is the executive committee. There was a bit of a lively discussion about the election yesterday, although I missed most of it. So I have one new thing. As you know, the DDA regularly receives FOIAs, and so I'd like to move a resolution designating the DDA's Jada as the DDA's FOIA coordinator going forward. So do I have a motion? Yeah. Support? So any questions about that? Susan, do you want to talk at all about that, or it just is what it is?
It is what it is. Effectively, I've been meeting on JADA all this time. It looks like I've been doing it, but as one of the most detail-oriented people I know, this is just formalizing what has already been happening.
So Jada, I'm sure that you're very excited about that, so we'll go ahead and vote that change for you.
Thank you, sir. May I have another?
Yeah. So
God bless her and Godspeed.
So all those in favor of designating Jada as the FOIA coordinator, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay.
Just Jada says nay.
Jada, you can't vote. So the resolution passes. Congratulations, Jada. Our next committee meeting is December 5th at 11 a.m. And so that's it for that. Any new business? Seeing none. Any other audience participation? Also seeing none. I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Support.
So all those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. Motion passes.
Thank you, guys.
Yay.